Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for virtual Pisco Cocktail Masterclass and Happy Hour, hosted by TL Insider's Bartender-In-Residence, Evelyn Chick. Here are some quick housekeeping rules. Please make sure to keep your mics muted during the class, but we encourage you to leave your cams on. So I see a few people have some super fun backgrounds there. So please make sure to keep your video on if you'd like. We'd love to see you as you're making your cocktails and as we go through the class. We also encourage you to ask any questions you may have in the chat box at the bottom of your screens throughout the class, and Evelyn should be able to answer most of your questions. So thank you. Thank you, Evelyn, for hosting the super fun Pisco class for us this evening. So take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me again. My name is Evelyn. So if you haven't seen me here before, I'm Toronto Life's bartender-in-residence. And once every month or so, we host a little cocktail class and explore different spirits and different pours that we haven't before. So, with Prom Peru, which is the Peruvian consulate, I'm excited to present the spirit of Pisco. So it's one of my favorite spirits. The oldest spirit of the New World, and I think highly underutilized. So I'm going to dig a little bit into the history first, kind of like my other classes, and kind of like go through and see what the spirit is and what it looks like before we dig into the cocktails. Because I think when you pick up a bottle in the LCBO or you order something online and you go to a new country and you try their spirit of that they want to highlight, I think it's so important to know what goes in the bottle, just so you know how to pick up the different flavors of it and then how to utilize it in a cocktail. So the origin of the name Pisco comes from the port city of the same name in the south of Peru, which I find like the history of Pisco itself is so important as to how you will pick Pisco in the LCBO, etc. So it's established more than 500 years ago. The port of Pisco was an important center of the export of Peruvian wine and the grape-based spirit that went on to become globally as Pisco. So the history is actually a word that comes from the language of Quechua, meaning bird. It is said that many years before the Spanish arrival, the chief of Quimanco, which I'm like butchering the pronunciation of it, lived in the Bay of Paracas, where thousands of birds seek shelter. The villages called the birds Pisco, Pisco, which is the first origin of the word. So the Spanish arrived at these shores and brought their native vines from the Canary Islands, introducing a distilled spirit and adapting to the surroundings, giving the rise to the Cuebanza grape. So if you went to the runner store and picked up the La Caravero Pisco, this is made from the grape varietal Cuebanza, which is the most commonly used to distill Pisco. And I think that's really interesting because digging into what is Pisco, we all know that it's a style of brandy, which is a grape distillate made with grapes grown in 5 different producing regions of the coast of Peru. It's said to be one of the oldest spirits in the world, and it's first being mentioned in 1804, and it's carried around like an expensive cognac. So when you come to think about cognac being a grape distillate, I think you should kind of have a newfound respect for Pisco after the seminar because it is made from really interesting grapes. As I mentioned, terroir is kind of really important to this. Peruvian Pisco producing areas are coastal. So if you're familiar with Lima, if you've had the chance to go there, Ica, Arequipa, Manquegua, and the valleys of Tacna, they're all wine growing regions. So the highest percentage of Pisco is produced in Lima. Grapes are grown in the valleys from the middle to the south, and it's higher in humidity because it's closer to the ocean, and it's also a valley, so it's really hot, which means the grapes are going to be full of flavor. So once you've kind of taken a little sip of Pisco, you'll find that in terms of a clear brandy, the texture and the mouthfeel is actually tropical and robust, which I find really interesting. So if you're a wine or grape nerd like myself, you'll really appreciate sort of the production of it. There are 2 types of grape that make Peruvian Pisco, an aromatic and non-aromatic varietals. So some of you may be familiar with grapes like Torontel and Moscatel. I'm not going to go into the crazy 8 different varietals as of this moment, but those of the aromatic varietals make really sort of delicious, floral, aromatic Piscos, whereas a Cuebanza, which is most commonly used, is non-aromatic. That's a black Creole grape brought on by the Spanish conquerors. It actually means break, which I also find really interesting. So the Black Creole grape cluster is like so large and so heavy that when they're growing on the branches, it is said that it would break the branches it carries on. So it's actually a really resilient grape as well, and a really interesting twist. So from the combination of grapes comes 3 different categories of Pisco. Again, with the one that I have in front of me, and probably the ones that you got from your runner store, it is called Puro, which means it is being distilled with a single varietal grape. And then there's a Mosto Verde, which means green must. It's a process where distillation is done before fermentation, leaving about 20% sugar. The Piscos are usually a little bit more round and aromatic and velvety, which I find interesting. And the last is a blended Pisco, which uses 2 or more types of Pisco grapes, whether or not it's a mix of the grapes itself, the must from the Pisco grapes, or the fresh wine, or the Pisco after distillation. So everyone always asks me as a bartender, like, how do you pick a Pisco? It's such a new sort of category to explore. And I always say, yes, there are 2 different types of Pisco, and a lot of people like think Chilean Pisco is Pisco or Peruvian Pisco is Pisco. But in my opinion, the Peruvian Pisco just has more duplicity when it comes to the raw material. So the ripeness and the selection and fermentation of the grape, and then, the magic that happens with the Pisco maker's guidance in the still, it just gives a more flavorful and more aromatic product. For the sake of this class, I'll talk about Pisco made with the Quebranta grape, that is a Peruvian Pisco. It just gives this kind of like fruity, banana-y, apple-y, toasty, nutty flavor to it. And as something that is clear and doesn't go through barrel aging, this actually contributes to a lot of really delicious twist on classic cocktails, which we'll go through today. So the one we have in front of us is a single distilled Quebranta Pisco, as I mentioned, and it's distilled to 40% ABV, which is alcohol by volume, through alembic pot stills. So pot stills, whether or not it be whiskey, gin, vodka, anything that goes through pot stills usually has a more rounded and a more viscous mouthfeel to it, just because it's distilled to a lower alcohol percentage. That means it's watered down less. So for this particular Pisco, it's rested for a minimum of 6 months. As I mentioned, the almond kind of like banana and chocolatey notes is really interesting to have in a Pisco because it's clear. So just imagine sort of the amount that the grape contributes to the specific spirit. That's why I love mixing with Pisco. It's just so interesting to sort of substitute for gin or even substitute for tequila and something like that. So the next time you walk into an LCBO and you're like, okay, what spirit do I experiment with? I think Pisco is something that's like a really cool one to sort of pull out and impress your guests. So as someone who mixes with Pisco quite a bit, I like to start with a classic Pisco drink that we already know, something like a Pisco sour, where the lime and the froth kind of gives way to different flavors from a Pisco. And then we're gonna do the Pisco sour first, which will show you like proper technique, how to do so, how to get that froth. Egg whites only adds texture, so don't worry about the flavor for it. And you'll find that lime and sort of the texture brings out this really cool floral notes of the Pisco. And then we're going to follow this with the Chilcano, which is typically made with ginger ale, Pisco, and lime and bitters. But we're going to do a little twist on that today and add some basil to it to make it a little bit more herbal and also kind of make it a little bit more interesting as well. And with these different cocktails, you can substitute other sweeteners, or you can add some jazz to it, add some different bitters to yield different types of flavors. And also, lastly, is do a Pisco punch, which is actually the oldest punch recorded in any cocktail book. And I think the fact that that came up is like so great because it's so simple. It's just typically made with Pisco pineapple gum syrup, which is actually a thicker pineapple syrup, and lime juice. And the Queen used to serve it to the Navy. So today we're going to walk through these 3 different drinks. So if you have your ingredients, I would definitely grab it right now, and I'll try to sort of slowly walk through it, and I'll let you know what the different drinks will help bring out the flavors of the Pisco. So I'm going to give everyone 2 seconds. If you have any questions about the history, I would type it in the chat right now, or just like unmute yourself and ask. and then we'll start collecting our ingredients for a pisco sour. Okay. I don't see any questions so far, but I'm just going to give it a few minutes just so everyone can collect their ingredients. So for a classic pisco sour, you'll obviously have a delicious Peruvian pisco, and then you have your shaker tin. If you need to use a gin bottle or a mason jar or whatnot, that totally works. But I have a shaker tin just for the sake of, you know, I'm a bartender, I always have this around. You need 1 egg. We're only going to use the egg whites. You can save the yolk for later. And for the sake of simplicity, we're going to use white sugar. You need a tablespoon of that and an ounce of lime juice. I pre-squeeze mine because I'm lazy, but if you have fresh limes, I would say it's about a lime and a half. Are you all ready? I can't see anyone. So Chantal, maybe you tell me if anyone's nodding.
It looks like everyone's, yeah, we have some thumbs up. It looks like everyone's ready.
Yeah, awesome. So while making a pisco sour, if you have something like simple syrup at home, I think definitely use that. But as per myself, I don't have just simple syrup laying around. I don't really take sugar with my coffee, so all I have is white sugar. So the first process is actually to mix the sugar with the citrus, because citrus dissolves sugar better than alcohol would. So it's a perfect little sour mix that you can make yourself. Definitely not the sort of artificial ones that we're used to from the bar gun from the 90s. It's a natural sour mix. So say if you're not making a pisco sour, if you're making another type of sour, like a gin or whatnot, I definitely think this proportion will really help you. So in your shaker tin, pour out 1 tablespoon, which is actually half an ounce of white sugar. Just pour it in. And then you're going to do double the amount of citrus. So we're going to do 2 tablespoons of lime juice in your shaker tin or your gin bottle or whatever you're doing. And then what we're going to do is just whirl it around and mix it so it's integrated. And this process will help kind of get rid of the grittiness that the sugar provides. So it's going to whirl it around until the sugar dissolves.
Being self-employed, coverage was never really a priority, but my little...
Awesome. And then once the sugar is dissolved, it kind of becomes this like lighter color, this like pasty lighter color in there. And then you can add your egg white. So if you haven't cracked egg whites and separate them, if you're not a crazy baker, I would do it in another glass and then put it back in again. But I trust myself. So I'm just going to crack the egg white directly into my tin, separate the yolk. There you go. Maybe use it for baking later. Grab a towel. And then, of course, the most important part, you want to add 2 ounces of Peruvian Pisco. And this is a Cuebanto Pisco. So 2 ounces is actually about 4 tablespoons. So just pour it right in there. And then what you're going to do is actually froth it up. So the next process is pretty important, which is, you know, kind of allowing for the egg white to emulsify. And that kind of just gives you the froth that you need for a beautiful pisco sour. So just grab and just give it a good shake, about 5 to 15 seconds. If you shake really fast in 5 seconds, if you're sort of medium or slower, I would say 15. All right. So you should see that like very integrated. I'm trying not to like tip it too much, but you should see that it's sort of like a little bit paler in color. That means all your ingredients are integrated. And then you want to add your ice. So add your ice until it's a little bit more than your liquid. And make sure it's nice and full. So the point of it is that you want to emulsify this even more. So you should hear the ice cube going kind of back and forth, kind of like a choo-choo train. So again, you're shaking this for 10 to 15 seconds. Let me know if I'm going too fast or if you need a little break. Oh, this is really cold. Perfect. And then now I like serving my Pisco sours in like a little sour glass. You can get all these ingredients or these different tools at Cocktail Emporium, which is where I frequently visit. You pour it in your glass. There are actually Peruvian bitters that you can put in your Pisco sour. I don't personally have it at the moment, but again, if you're really truly, okay, this is like the night that I'm gonna spend doing a Peruvian themed everything, definitely pick yourself up one bottle. What it does is that it brings out those sort of almondy, like banana notes that I was mentioning before. So it should look nice and frothy like this. Cheers. I love Pisco sours. They're delicious. So this is how you make a Pisco sour. How's everyone following along? Feel nice about it? Yeah, perfect. Good, good. So the Pisco sour in itself, if you had a second to take a sip, because of that texture, like I was mentioning before, and sort of the viscosity of a Peruvian Pisco, it just makes those different floral notes and maybe the like banana and the nuttiness, all that come out. And I think it's so fantastic because it just shows you the diversity of the spirit. And someone who's sort of nervous going in and picking a Pisco, you know that something of quality will actually give you a better drink. If you were to use, say, a Chilean Pisco or something that's, you know, not Puro, or something that is sort of your like baseline Pisco, you won't get that sense of like complexity within your drink, because when you think about it, it's only this ingredient and a couple more. So just the sugar and the lime, and the egg white just adds texture. So I would honestly take this sort of idea and this this direction to pick any of your spirits. If your spirit base is good, then your drink is going to be better, because there's so many different nuances in like really excellent spirits that you won't find in something that is like baseline. So next, we're going to make a Chilcano. It's super simple, like I mentioned before. Normally, it's just Peruvian Pisco, a little bit of squeeze of lime, ginger ale, and Angostura bitters. But we're going to spice it up a bit today. And by spicing it up, like making a little bit of herbs to it, adding a little bit of herbs to it. And the reason why I like doing basil with this is because I find the combination of ginger and basil just goes hand in hand, and it's so delicious. And it also brings out the sort of other element of Pisco, which is like the grassiness that you'll get when you smell it. So when I first smell Pisco, it's a lot of that like herbal quality, similar to when I approach a tequila or approach an agave spirit, something that is like from the ground, from earth. Imagine this being a grape distillate and agave being, or tequila being an agave spirit. Those sort of like herbal earthy notes don't come from something like a grain, unless if it goes into a barrel. So because this is such a cool expression of the raw material, so you get those like really cool herbal notes to it. So we're going to make a Chilcano, but with basil. Really, really easy. So we're going to start off with half an ounce of fresh lime juice. Dump it in there. I'm going to sweeten it with a little bit of honey. If you're purchasing a store-bought ginger ale, let's say if it's Canada Dry or whatever, you don't necessarily have to add the honey to it. I just find that the honey brings out a really cool sort of like nutty vanilla note from the Pisco. But if you want to eliminate that, that's totally fine. And then you want to add your 2 ounces of Pisco. So I used a measuring jigger this last time, but just remember that 1 tablespoon is half an ounce. And 2 ounces is 4 tablespoons.
How much did you say for the honey?
It's half an ounce.
All right.
Yeah. But if you're someone who really likes like super tart and dry drinks, you can either eliminate the honey or dial it back a little bit.
What about agave syrup or maple syrup instead of honey if somebody's allergic to pollen?
Yeah, that would totally work too. I would probably do the same amount as you would a honey. I would probably do a little bit less if you were to use simple syrup, just because the amount of sugar in it is a little bit higher. So if you were to add like a tablespoon of white sugar, like we did the Pisco sour, then you would add a little bit less because they're density of sugar within those ingredients are different. So if you were to substitute honey with maple syrup, then I would use the same amount. Again, like when I first tasted a Chilcano, I was like, oh, I'm so not used to the fact that this is actually like got a little bit more sweetness to it because my palate is so dry. But because the Pisco is so present in that drink, it actually dries it out a little bit and it gives it a different flavor that you would than just tasting ginger ale lime, a spirit. We have 1 tablespoon of fresh lime juice, 1 tablespoon or less of honey, depending on your sweetness, depending on your palate. And then we're going to do 4 tablespoons of Peruvian Pisco. So this is my favorite part because you can actually play with any herbs. I think like something with Pisco, like a tarragon would work, or even rosemary. But as I said, basil and ginger is just such an easy pairing, and I would just hate myself when I didn't do it. So my basil leaves are quite small, so I picked like a little handful of it. So all I'm doing is releasing the oils. I clapped it a little bit and tossed it into the Collins glass like this. And then what I'm going to do is fill it 3/4 with ice. And then you're just going to give it a nice little stir. You can use chopsticks as well. I think that's the easiest. And you can actually whirl the basil around because this process will actually release a little bit more of those oils, and the basil flavor would actually go all the way throughout, and it'll really contribute to your drink in general. So give it a nice little stir, about 5 to 10 seconds until you feel the glass getting a little cold. And this process helps chill down your ingredients. So when you're topping something, say if it's ginger beer, ginger ale, whatever that is, then it'll give you like a nicely balanced temperature. So not everything is warm at the bottom and everything's cold and top. And to make an excellent drink, I think this process just like helps you allow for those ingredients to integrate really quickly. So I know that I said, I think top with your favorite ginger beer. I actually found this really cool thing I'm going to try today called the Fever Tree Smoky Ginger Ale. Again, this is something that I'm like, okay, like I based this cocktail off of, our traditional Chilcano, which is only 3 ingredients. What else can I do to make it a little bit more complex and like fit the flavors that I want it to make? So I'm going to add some smoky ginger ale. If you have ginger beer, like I listed in the ingredients list, absolutely do that. This is just something I picked up today that I thought was interesting to put in. So once you add it, just give it another nice little whirl. Don't add too much because your Pisco is going to disappear, and it's all just going to taste like ginger ale. 1 last little ice cube, and then if you have extra basil, I really like sort of laying 1 on top. Again, just release some oils. All you have to do is lightly clap it and just lay it over top. So every single sip you take, you'll smell the basil, you'll get the ginger, you'll get the Pisco, you'll get the lime. Oh, that's delicious. Do we like this one? Everyone's following along okay? It smells so good. All right. So now we have 2 of the most sort of traditional Pisco drinks on their way. The Pisco Sour, again, I'm going to repeat the portions just in case we're still kind of falling behind. No problem at all. I just want to make sure that everyone get their proper Pisco Sours right. So you have 2 ounces of Peruvian Pisco, and you have 1 ounce, which is 2 tablespoons of lime juice. You have 1/2 ounce, which is 1 tablespoon of pure white sugar. If, say, you were to use other sweeteners, I would keep thinking that pure white sugar will always be the measurement that is going to be the least out of the different sugar additives that you add in. So say if you were to use maple syrup, for example, for a Pisco Sour, I think that's actually really great because when you think about it, like maple, nutty, apple, grapes, like that all go well together. So I would actually do 1.5 tablespoons of maple syrup. So 2 ounces, which is 4 tablespoons of Peruvian Pisco, 1 tablespoon of lime juice, and 2 tablespoons of lime juice and 1 tablespoon of white sugar with 1 egg white. And then the Chilcano or the basil Chilcano, you have a couple basil leaves, You have 2 ounces, which is again 4 tablespoons of Peruvian Pisco, 1 tablespoon of lime juice, and 1 tablespoon of honey and or maple syrup, and or half a tablespoon of white sugar. Top with ginger beer or ginger ale. Now we're going to move on to the Pisco punch. I love the Pisco punch because it's just kind of a really fun take on a really old cocktail recipe. So if you have a shaker tin or a gin bottle or whatever that is, I would take it now. And again, we're going to start with 2 ounces of Pisco. So you have 3 2-ounce drinks in front of you. If you share it with someone, that's great. If not, then, you know, it's Thursday, you deserve it. So in your shaker tin, you want to add your 4 tablespoons, which is 2 ounces of Peruvian Pisco. And I really love this because the pineapple juice really brings out sort of another realm of Peruvian Pisco. So something that's a little bit more tropical will actually highlight sort of like allspice element of the particular spirit. That's why, you know, say like white rum and dark rum really works well with pineapple because it brings out that sort of kind of like marzipan-y, like allspice element of that particular spirit. And I think those notes are shared with Pisco. And, you know, we covered a lot of different notes that you can pick out from Pisco. But this one is like particularly one of my favorite ones. And then we're going to do 1 ounce of pineapple juice, which is actually 2 tablespoons. Ta-da. We're going to do, say, a tablespoon and a half of fresh lime juice. I just tasted my pineapple juice. It's actually quite sweet, so. I'm going to adjust as per this cocktail recipe, but if you have all the ingredients already, follow the recipe that we sent you. But make sure that whatever sugar you're adding is less than that of your lime juice. So now I'm going to add a tablespoon of white sugar, which is half an ounce. So this is nice because pineapple has like a natural ingredient that helps it froths up. So all you have to do is find a little rough glass, pour it in, and that'll be like a perfect little punch. This is also great if you're having friends over when you can, your little bubble, when you have your little bubble over for dinner. You can actually pour all these ingredients in like a little jug and maybe like stretch it out with a little bit of ginger ale or stretch it out with a little bit of soda, and that makes a fantastic punch. Remember the days when you had punch, you know, and you're at prom or, you know, like during your gatherings or whatnot? This is actually such a fantastic little punch that's not just typically juice, wine, some sugar, and some other additives. I find that the Pisco like brings out a lot of different flavors of the punch. So instead of you having to add so much more to it, these like few ingredients really sort of bring out the elements within Pisco. And if you're ever throwing a party, I think this will really be a crowd pleaser. So toss it in your shaker tin, and then now add ice 3/4 of the way up.
Lime juice you use? How much lime juice did you use?
I used 1.5 tablespoons.
Okay.
Of course. All right. So you want to cover up your shaker tin and give it a good vigorous shake again, about 10 to 15 seconds. All right, and then you want to pour it in your little rocks glass. And then you want to fill it back up with ice again. If you want to just actually, this is actually a fun, like a super fun chill drink. If you actually just want to like dump your ice back in, you totally can, so you don't have to grab more ice. I don't normally recommend it because it thins out the drink, but because there is like quite a bit of texture from the Pisco and the pineapple juice, if you dump the ice back in, you will drink it quite fast. So I won't worry about the ice chip sort of melting the drink a little bit. Normally, I wouldn't recommend, say, if you were to do a Pisco sour, to dump the ice back in, because the egg white will separate quite easily, because the ice chips will allow for extra dilution, and dilution just means like the melting of ice turning into water, and the addition of water to a certain drink. But in this case, because it's such a fun, fresh summer punch, then yeah, if you dump your ice back in, that's totally great. There we go. Here's the Pisco punch. Give it a try. Oh, I love it. I think the tropical element of the pineapple juice and Pisco, whoever came up with that, you know, hundreds of years ago, super genius. It just like gives it this like crazy burst of tropical flavor. And then when you go and taste back, you know, the two different drinks that you made previously, do you find that there's just a bunch of different notes that come out? Hence I picked these three drinks because they're all super refreshing, but it kind of just gives you this whole different set of flavor as you go through the drinks. So the Pisco Sour gives you that like really cool kind of florality to it. The basil Chilcano gives you like an herbal quality. And then the pineapple Pisco Punch gives you this like really nice element of like allspice. This is what I forgot, Angostura. So if you have Angostura bitters, put a couple dashes in your Pisco Punch. And now that will even sort of bring out the flavors of the Peruvian Pisco and your pineapple juice even more. So that little bit of Angostura, which is mainly like clove spiced, this little bit of spice is kind of like adding salt to your cooking or adding a little bit of like paprika or something like that. It like crazy enhances the flavors that you've put in to the Pisco Punch. Hence I recommend a couple dashes. If you don't have it, don't worry, it's still a super delicious drink, but it just brings out those flavors quite a bit. So there you go. Here's your Pisco Sour, your Chilcano with basil and honey, and then your Pisco Punch. I know I like just ran through that. I just looked at the time. How is everyone doing? I really want to know what the drinks look like. Or if you're happy to show it. Because I feel like I'm going to check the chat because I realized I hadn't, to see if we have any questions. So the Pisco that we are using is a Quebranza Pisco. There are Torontal Piscos. It is harder to find in our market, as per every single, thing in Ontario. It's harder to find. But if you got the bottle of Pisco from Runner, it is a Quebranza Pisco. I actually have a delicious Moscatel Pisco in my personal collection, and tasting them side by side, it's just got this like really like beautiful other set of like lilac, like crazy florality. It's nuts. So the next time you sort of pick up a Pisco and take a look at the label, you'll find that they like a really quality Pisco will definitely tell you the grape varietal it is, whether or not it's pure, green must, etc. Please feel free to jump in with questions. I'm just sitting here with 3 drinks. I wish I could hear everyone. They look like so...
What other combination of like ingredients you will do instead of like basil? Is it like a mint or rosemary, or what will complement Pisco well?
Yeah, so I mean, Pisco I find is a very versatile spirit. So say if you were to do something like mint and lime, that would go really well with it. I think rosemary would go really well. You can't really go wrong with anything like that. I think the only thing that I wouldn't do with the Pisco is try to substitute it for something that's aged. So say, for example, if you were to use, Pisco in like a Vieux Carré, which is normally like a rye whiskey based classic, or say like an old fashioned, you'd have to do other things to allow for those flavors to pop, because you'll expect less. You'll kind of expect more from the Pisco, because it really, as a spirit, doesn't have that sort of like oak influence, so like vanillin and bitterness and rootiness to it. But if you were to substitute it for like a clear spirit drink, I think it's pretty foolproof. So I've had a Pisco Martini before. One of the pretty easy to follow Pisco classics is called an El Capitan, which is kind of like a Manhattan style Pisco. a Manhattan style drink with Pisco as a base and with the addition of sweet vermouth and Angostura bitters. So in that sense, yes, you can sort of substitute the whiskey for Pisco and it'll still yield a very delicious drink. But because the sweet vermouth carries a sweetness that will carry through the Pisco, so that would work that way. But say for something like, you know, even like a Tom Collins, which is essentially what we're building in the Chilcano and the Pisco punch anyway. So Tom Collins is typically gin, sugar, lemon, and soda. If you substitute Pisco, the flavors will just be a little bit more complex even. It'll be different than you would say a gin. I saw someone ask a question, have you ever used Angostura for Pisco sour? Absolutely, yeah. Definitely use Angostura. As I mentioned, there's a lot of kind of grassy and rootiness that comes with Pisco and also a lot of florality. So that little bit of cloviness actually like brings out all those like tropical flavors. How do you store Pisco? Oh, I only saw half the question. Yeah. How do you store Pisco and how long does it last for? Well, Pisco is a distilled spirit, so I just store it at room temperature. And it lasts forever. Unless if you drink it really fast, then it doesn't last that long. But you don't have to put it in the fridge or anything. It's really interesting that you asked that because there's actually a few kind of similarities and a few different notes you can draw from the grapes that you are used to make Pisco and the distilled spirit itself. But anything that's distilled at 40% and then watered down to 40% is shelf stable. But I think a lot of people can think of grape distillates and associate them with fortified wines, which is essentially also grape based. Whether or not it be, you know, a sherry or a vermouth or whatnot, those are usually under 26%, and anything under sort of 26, I still let it sit on the shelf, no problem. But I would say anything under 17%, I would definitely store it in the fridge, even with fortifieds. So all my sherrys stay in my fridge, all the vermouths stay in the fridge. And I think a lot of people are nervous to try vermouth because, you know, the bars that are in existence before the cocktail revolution in you know the late 90s and the early 20s, vermouths are left in the back bar. So imagine it just kind of like, you know, breathing in all the oxygen just like wine, and it starts getting more sour and it starts getting more vinegary, obviously in a less timeline than you would say leaving a bottle of red wine open. It becomes oxidized less quickly, but it will still oxidize. So because Pisco is distilled, it goes through a process where the raw material, which is a grape musk, and the grape juices, etc., it goes through and it gets heat up, and distillation means it's collecting the vapor off of that mixture. So that vapor gets put in, you know, a bottle to age for at least 6 months and stuff like that. That's just vapor from the raw material. So because it's distilled to such a high alcohol percentage, it's completely shelf stable. Thank you. I love these questions. Chantel, did you get to make one?
I didn't. No, I've been in front of my laptop all day, so I'm hoping to make this after we're recording this. So if anyone kind of missed anything or wants to, you know, look at this again, we'll be able to share our video with all of you after this class too. It looks so good though. It looks amazing.
Yeah, well, I hope everyone's enjoying their drinks. And again, like, you know, thank you for having me back again as TL Bartender-In-Residence. I can't wait till, you know, my next spirit to explore. There's honestly so many ways that you can use Pisco outside of Pisco sours and, you know, Chilcanos, that like when you just pick it up and kind of use your creativity and go beyond your imagination a little bit and try to kind of think about flavor combinations that would go with a Pisco, it'll be great. And how you would tell like the flavors that you want to pick out of the Pisco is just sort of like get it in a little glass, like how you would know is wine, to be honest, because it's such an aromatic spirit. So I would like pour a little bit in a wine glass, smell it, and like notice the different notes that is like floral, herbal, whatever, and then taste it when you taste it, you'll find that it's like nutty, appley, chocolatey, like, you know, banana-y, depending on the Pisco you use. And I just find this so interesting. It's the same way that how people really, really, you know, enjoy cognac, because it is such a pure expression of that ingredient that is your grapes. And then obviously cognac mostly goes through barrel aging. So then there's another element of that would go into aging something that's a grape distillate. But Pisco is a brandy. Brandies are made from grapes. Peruvian Pisco just has like a higher, I think, like quality of standard in terms of where it is. But I don't think brandies are appreciated as much as they should. So the next time you go to LCBO, don't forget about Pisco. Just, you know, maybe choose it, test it in some stuff. And if you're like, hey, I can't figure out the flavor combination, just make a lot of Pisco sours, because I love Pisco sours and I'll never stop drinking them.
Awesome. Do you have any food pairings that you would recommend with the cocktails that you just made this evening?
Yeah, great question. I mean, like, I feel like ceviche is pretty much like a very easy one to go to. Anything that is like fresh with citrus, maybe some spice even, that would be really great. Especially with the chilcano, because of the basil and the ginger, it really makes way for something that's slightly spicy. Now all I want is ceviche, because like in my brain, that's all I see in front of me.
Ceviche is so good. We actually did like a ceviche masterclass with Chef Claudia Prule before COVID. So hopefully maybe we could do another one with him and have you like, you know, make a couple extra cocktails with ceviche. That'd be super fun.
Yeah, sounds great. And you know what's actually really good? If you are making a ceviche, alcohol actually cures fish very well. So, or even a gravlax or anything like that, try to toss a little bit of Pisco in your next ceviche. It actually helps cure the fish. And it actually brings out like a really nice flavor to it. Like, don't pour a whole bottle in, but like, you know, maybe half an ounce, whatever. That will be really, really great. So give it a shot, because I honestly think you'll find the flavor combinations really interesting. I know that from a lot of chefs friends that I talk to, they do a lot of gravlax with vodka, and I'm like, why? It doesn't give you any flavor. Like, try some gin or some Pisco. Pretty much any clear spirit would do really well.
That's a great tip. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So we'd love to see everyone's photos. If you'd like to share them on Instagram, once you have your cocktails ready to go, please make sure to tag Evelyn and TL Insider. We'd love to see those pics through Instagram. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you so much, Evelyn. This was amazing. I can't wait till the next cocktail class in September. Stay tuned for updates on what the next spirit will be, but we're super happy that you can join us this evening. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much. And if you're like really proud of your Pisco creation, I would tag myself, so Evelyn Chick, on Instagram, and also Prom Peru, right? Am I right? Prom Peru.
That's
yes.
right.
PROMPERU. So they can like take a look and see who is actually using Pisco, and maybe tag you in one of their. Tag you in one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Evelyn.